Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I also go by Lizzie, but I just wanted to say welcome to Lizzie's Library. This YouTube channel has been a thought of mine for a really long time, and I'm a little nervous. I have a whole script here, so if you see me looking down, that's why. But I figure I can start off by telling you a little bit about myself and introducing you to what I really envision this channel to be. But essentially my name is Elizabeth. I go by Lizzie, and I'm 23 years old. I currently live in Boston, but I'm originally from New York, about an hour north of New York City. And I've grown up just being a knowledge consumer, a lifelong learner, and have always just been obsessed with books and just losing myself in a good story. And I'm looking, the first books I started reading were Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Divergent, so I'm literally like every other girl in the world. But I took it maybe to a new level. I was obsessed with all of those. I used to write the Hunger Games fan fiction all about Peeta, of course, the love of my life, my favorite book character. And I've just always been interested in reading dystopian novels, and that's kind of like my bread and butter, but I haven't really been reading that for a long time. I've been dabbling in different genres, but in high school I actually was a part of a book club for all 4 years, and at the end of it I was the president of that book club, and I used to lead the discussions, coordinate the votes, and just I really always enjoyed discussing the books that we were reading with people from different backgrounds and different ideas and different interpretations and thoughts about the narrative, and just really getting down and deep and dissecting the books and what people were interpreting. And so I went to college at UMass Amherst, and I studied biochemistry, and now I work at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in Boston as a clinical research coordinator, which is lovely. And over the last year, a friend and I started a book club together, and it's called Bookish in Boston, and I just figured it'd be a great idea to start talking about the books and recording them, because I've always wanted to have my own little personal library and documentation of what I like to read. I'm trying to see if yes. And so part of also why I'm doing this is because I feel as though I'm a little bit lost in the sauce of my 20s. I recently decided not to go to medical school, and generally I'm just feeling like I could use some stability, some community right now, and I think what better way to cultivate that than by starting a YouTube channel about one of my biggest passions, which is reading and consuming knowledge. And so welcome. Right now for book club this past month, and it's April 2024, we've been reading Everything I Know About Love. But more personally, I've also been reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, and I've been listening to the audiobook of that, and then Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford on my Kindle here, and then I have some cute little book stickers on the back as well. And so I'm typically reading 3 books at once. I like to have a book for every mood, and every setting. So for a paperback or a hardcover, I typically read that during the day or when the lights are on. For when I'm walking or driving or doing anything when I'm on the go, I use my audiobook, specifically Libby. Big shout out to Libby. And then for reading at night with the lights off, I typically use my Kindle, so I'm pretty much always reading around 3 books at once. How fast I'm reading them depends on what it's about. Right now I'm reading all nonfiction books, which is pretty unique for me, actually. I don't typically do that, but why not? And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the book Everything I Know About Love, specifically by Dolly Alderton, because that's our book club book for this month. And I figured I could just do a little video synopsis of everything I'm reading, and we can get to know each other through that. So I do, like I said, I have some notes here. So the first thing that I noticed or that the book talked about, is Dolly starts off in her teenage years just discussing all of her crushes and just teenage love. And the thought that came to mind for me is dissecting the differences between teenage love and adult love. And I think this is particularly a topic that I'm interested in because I did have a pretty turbulent relationship when I was young, and I'm now in a long-term relationship, and just differentiating between the two is something that I've done in just my own self-reflection, but figured it'd be nice to do in the context of this book. And so really for me, I remember having my first crush when I was like 5 years old, and the first time I fell in love I was 15 years old, and that first teenage love is just filled with just strict emotion. At least from my experience, it was all about the butterflies, the highs, the lows, and just everything was just inputted and just filled with just intense emotion, whether that be good or bad. And I just never even questioned my future with that person. It wasn't something I couldn't articulate or put into words or thoughts, what life was going to be like, and the complexities and the distances I would travel, both emotionally, physically, all of that above. And it was just that love was really the center of my being, and so it was very pure, and I would say in a way very naive. And when it went away, I think I was devastated in a way where I felt like I lost that kind of tethering to the center of my universe and being. And it took me a really long time to kind of parse out what that meant, and how to re-piece together my identity without that sort of romantic love. And I know in the book that Dolly talks about her first couple of dates and just like being obsessed with boys, and that's all that she thought of all the time. And I really related to that, and I'm sure you all do. Just those first crushes and those first relationships and just the high intensity. And as the book progressed and she switches into like talking about that adult love, and there's just so many other factors that come into play, like money and time and even ability to see each other with work and family and everything else. And the love that I have now and I feel now is I would say it's just as intense, but in a different way. It's more, I feel like I have a better grasp on what life means to me, at least at this context, at 23 years old. And so I feel like I have a little bit more understanding of where that love fits in my life, and that love doesn't define me. It enhances my experience and provides me with a level of stability, but also a level of challenge, continuing compromise, and honestly, again, just that opportunity for personal growth and development. And I certainly don't take this love for granted this time, and I'm very much so try to be more self-reflective, evaluate where I'm going wrong and how I can be better, but also just navigating how to even communicate in a healthy manner with a partner is something that's really unique for me, at least in the context of a long-term relationship in my 20s. So yeah, I thought that just the way that Dolly talks about her experiences with transitioning from that really intense, young, romantic love to changing your identity for that person and feeling like that person is the center of your universe, to kind of more the adult where you have to figure out where you fit into each other's lives and how do you communicate, and all of those more adult features. It really resonated with me. So yes, and comment if you have any first love stories or just any recountants of just an intense first love or first crush or anything like that. I'd love to hear your stories as well. A good one. Did you have expectations / timelines for firsts when you were young? A lot of what Dolly was saying is that she always wanted to be an adult, and with that came expectations for when she would do more adult things, like have sex with somebody or kiss somebody for the first time or have that first relationship. And I think for me, I just always threw myself into whatever romantic love interest was in my way. I was dating my way through middle school, dating my way through high school. I was absolutely boy crazy. This did not stop when I went to college. I dated somebody before my current long-term boyfriend. And I think for me, I never had that expectation because I always just went for it. And so I would say I was on the younger side of things for experiencing first kisses, my first sexual experience, things along those lines, and I never really had time to reflect on that. And so I'm on the opposite side of things, where it took me till now to reflect on the timing of all of that and why it was necessary for me to throw myself into these romantic relationships early on. And so this isn't a therapy session, but I have done that self-reflection, and I think with not having these expectations / timelines for firsts, now having done a lot of those things and having done a lot of those things quite young, I think if I were giving advice to my younger self, I would say, put on the pedal, reevaluate. Why are you looking to supplement a feeling of loneliness with another person? Why is that? And I would encourage myself to self-reflect. And I think with all of these questions, I'll link them in the bio. I just encourage you to self-reflect and let me know whether, if you had expectations, were they met on the timeline you wanted them to be? And if you never did have expectations, was it because you did things too young, too fast? And what are the implications of that? I'd love to hear your stories as well. And it seems like for Dolly, specifically in the context of this book, she did have a lot of expectations and spent so much time on the chat messengers and dreaming up all of these romantic experiences online, and just being disappointed when those things didn't come to fruition. And it seemed like that sort of feeling of disappointment really followed her throughout her adult life as well. And we'll get to this later, but I think for Dolly specifically, and spoilers ahead, she finds that disappointment that she felt was because of expectation she was putting on a situation that was trying to supplement a feeling of not really understanding herself or knowing herself. And I do think that's very poignant, and something that I definitely learned a lot from being a person in my young 20s, listening to somebody who is now in their 30s, I believe. This book was written in 2018 and she was 30 in 2018, so we can do the math in our heads. Okay. This is a fun one too. Rise of the internet, social media. And I alluded to this before in my prior talking point, but just Dolly talks about growing up as a millennial and the rise of chat messengers and chat bots, and all of the hacks that she used to alert the man that she was interested in that she was online, and all of those things. And it just made me laugh, because I feel like between millennial and Gen Z, and I'm a part of Gen Z, I was born in 2000, we have grown up alongside the advent of social media, of dating websites, of messengers, things like, I remember using Uvu, and I always was chatting with my crushes over Uvu, which was like prior to FaceTime even existing. And just I really remember just having built up a person or an interaction so much in my head, and when that person I finally met, or we discussed our whatever romantic attraction to each other in person, it just never went the way that I planned. And I also would oftentimes leave those interactions feeling disappointed, lonely, and I think that this is also a very relevant topic to now, how dating has progressed, and Dolly does talk a lot about this in this book, how meeting somebody in the wild is pretty difficult nowadays. And I do have to say, I was quite lucky. I met my current boyfriend through a mutual friend, but I do know a lot of my friends who are single in their 20s who just have a very touch and go relationship with the dating apps like Tinder, or I don't even think people use Tinder anymore, but like Hinge and Bumble and all of those apps, and just how the swiping and just that having to initially choose someone based off of their profile, the pull of the profile, and the 10 facts they've listed about themselves, and how that sometimes those facts don't really tell you about whether your morals align and whether you do have any actual interests that are shared besides just the going out for coffee and enjoying exploring. And so I do think I think there's derealization going on, depersonalization, and that dating for some people has become a game, but also has become a game that you're always losing. And so I do not have to use the dating apps, but I do feel for my friends who do, because I know that it's a really difficult experience. And I think that something that's collective amongst our population, and even from Dolly and what she described in here, is that nobody really wants that anymore. Nobody really wants to meet people online. So maybe potentially in the future things will change and people will be more out and about, willing to talk. And you know, where I live in Boston, there's such a large population of people in their younger 20s, mid-20s, late 20s there are all of these activities like Volo, which is sporting leagues, all these clubs and Facebook groups where meeting people in person is easier. But again, you have to go through online platforms to meet people. So I guess maybe my point is moot, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I would love to hear about your crushes and the advent of your foray into the dating apps, or even just like the chat messengers when you were younger. Shout out to all my people who used Ask FM, because that was a whole trip. So funny. Alrighty. Okay. And so, okay. So many things that I want to talk about. I'm like getting lost in the sauce here. I did want to just talk about Farley and Farley's relationship with the narrator, Dolly. And I think that is one of the central pillars and tenets of the novel, is Dolly exploring her relationship in context to love and romantic love and platonic love. And it seems like Farley's presence throughout Dolly's life is really that defining feature for her, where having that platonic love, and I think maybe I'm zooming ahead too far, but that platonic love and that love that you feel from your best friends really is enough. And I was very inspired by that relationship, and it really reminded me of my best friends from home, and just feeling grateful for that love, that unconditional love, and just even being able to grow side by side, even if it's at different paces or in parallel direction, just knowing that you have that unconditional love and support from those people in your life. Because romantic love, really there always is a little bit of a question mark on what the future holds, and it's a very sort of different love than the type of love that you have from your best friends. And so I would love to hear about the Farleys that you have in your life, and shout out to Farley, because she seemed, I feel bad for her in her 6-year-long almost marriage ending in a breakup. My heart was broken for her, and also for her sister Florence. That type of loss is so intense, and I can imagine how that really bled into the context of her relationship. And it was nice to see that the book was dedicated to Florence as well, and I was super inspired by her wisdom that she had. It's her wisdom and vibrance, vivaciousness that Dolly was able to translate to the pages as well. And then also just Rod Stewart. Just had to put Rod Stewart out. Dolly also, this is not on the paper, but something else I'm just remarking on in the book is just all of Dolly's talks about roommates and situations, and just all the weird houses that she lived in. And I particularly identify with that, because I have had my share of crazy roommates, good roommates, bad roommates, living in eclectic places. I once lived in a barn. That was crazy. I've lived in so many different places now, and there's something to be said about being a traveler in your 20s, moving from place to place with that solid foundation. I know that's not the case for everyone, but that really was, I think, part of what I noticed about this book, and something I really identified with, is just feeling like you don't have stability in your living place, but you have stability in the people that you surround yourself with in your community. And again, going back to why I'm starting this channel, it's because that I truly do feel this way, and having stability in the form of community is something that has become ever more important for me as I've grown up. And I sound like I'm 100 years old. I'm 23, but at least at this point in my life, that's what my self-reflection has led me to. Oh, and I want to pose a question to you guys. Did you want to be an adult when you were a teenager or a child? I'll answer this question for whomever. Yes, and yes. I was born in December of 2000, so all of my in New York, the cutoff is not until after December. So I was always the youngest like person in my grade, and always wanted to be older and more able to participate in all of the illicit and non-illicit activities that my peers were participating in, and just wanting to reclaim my life and become an adult and have responsibility and exert my passions for my activities in the context of my independence and not at the will of my parents. And I think now, in arriving and having moved out of my parents' house and now being financially independent from them, I'm like, what the hell? I was not prepared for this. Let me know how you feel, because honestly, I don't think I ever could have anticipated what it would be like to be in my 20s and be figuring out life. So again, let me know if you agree with that sentiment. Another thing, alcohol culture. So I do have very strong opinions on this. I in college was not really someone who went out and drank that much, but I also had a very toxic perfectionist mindset, and that I really wanted to go to medical school, and truly believed that I literally couldn't take a day off from studying ever, or else I wouldn't get in. Newsflash, I'm not trying to go to medical school anymore, so was it worth it? I'll say I don't have any regrets, but as far as being a part of that alcohol culture, I've been able to embrace going out for drinks, and I see the utilitarian like aspect of it at this point in time, and how it can lead to camaraderie. But I have to say, the alcohol consumption culture, I mean, I do have a background in medicine, and what I can tell you is that no amount, according to the medical oncologists that work at Dana-Farber, no amount of alcohol is good for you. And so I think that imbibing at a safe pace is like not really something that's viable. So I'm not really in favor of like the party culture, the alcohol culture. That being said, no judgment if that's you whatsoever. Like, I fully support you. You pop off, girl. Like, literally, I have so many friends who do that, and like would never like judge them. It's never been something for me. As someone who has struggled with anxiety, just substances is something that can be a little bit triggering for me. And I know that the next day I always just feel a little bit poopy, and I'm trying to keep my mind a little bit clear now as I'm just trying to navigate like these next steps in my life and trying to plan out some stuff. That being said, I do love me a glass of wine. I love being wine drunk so much. And I love red wine, by the way, but I think that the culture of alcohol that was presented in this book, which was what Dolly was going through, which was getting blackout drunk and trying to be the person that attracts attention and gets people to do crazy things and is out there. And Dolly made it very clear by the end of the book that she was chasing somebody, and that person was herself. She wasn't sure of herself. She didn't know really how to self-identify or where she fit in, and she used alcohol as a crutch or a coping mechanism, and so I just thought it was very inspiring to see someone coming out of that alcohol consumption culture talking about the implications of that. And I think one of her quotes, and I forget which one it is, but one of her, like, everything I knew about love at 28, something like that, is that it could have been Rod Stewart, I'm not 100% sure, but one in like 100 people can drink alcohol all the time and feel okay. And it's like 1 in 200 people can drink alcohol all the time and feel okay and not develop issues down the line. And I just personally really identified with that as someone a person where at my age, alcohol culture is really the bonding culture, the prevalent culture. Yes, and then, okay, last thing, and then I'll wrap up. But the therapy generation is something that I really identify with at the end when Dolly is going through therapy. And she just made it very clear that, like, it was not fun. It was like learning how to ride a bicycle, and it was uncomfortable and not great. And we are part of the therapy generation as Gen Z and millennials, and just being in therapy, talking about therapy has become very normalized, but I think that something that hasn't really been normalized about therapy or talked about much is that therapy is really difficult, to get yourself into a way where you're questioning your actions and doing that self-reflection on maybe why you're feeling a negative, or why you're feeling something that's making you feel negative. I don't personally believe that any emotions are negative, but just doing that self-reflection on why you're feeling a certain way and trying to see how you are the problem. And I've just tried to really embrace the mindset that like every problem I have can be solved within myself, through therapy, through the help of therapy, through the help of exercise. But just, it was very interesting to hear about how her successful therapy journey, and her being so honest and upfront about how difficult it was. So that's pretty much all I have, you guys. Feel free to comment about anything that you've heard in this video that you wanted to talk about or chat about with me. I'll leave you with this. So I would give my overall rating a 3.5 out of 5. I say 3.5 instead of 4 just because of the saturation of London slang that made it a little, or London English slang that made it a little bit difficult for me to understand some of the references at times. I had to look up what a Hindu was. Didn't know what that was, and so sometimes it made me a little bit unsure about the context or the meaning of certain sentences or phrases, and I felt like I couldn't really appreciate the breadth of what Dolly was saying because of just the input of so much of that jargon. That being said, I really did like this book. I think that the main theme of the book is that one, platonic love is just as powerful and important as romantic love, and two, that you are enough. And I think those two messages are very empowering, very positive, and I love a book that leaves me with something positive. And so, yes, I think that's pretty much it. I look forward to my next book. My plan is to kind of just debrief all of the books I'm reading, maybe not to this duration, but just going through all the books I'm reading is almost like a personal journey. So thanks for being a part of my first YouTube video. I hope I didn't say anything too bad or too silly, but I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.